Hello, my friend, and welcome back to the Menstrual Cycle Mastery Podcast. I am delighted you're here and welcome to the show if you're new. I'm Lisa, I'm a menstrual cycle coach, and today I'm going to be talking about supporting your clients through urgency. This is a topic that we talk about a lot in the professional training that I offer from the Menstrual Coach Academy. So, my work has two layers to it. I work with clients who need help for themselves, and then I also train coaches and professionals and facilitators, healers who want to train in this area and be certified in the field of menstrual cycle coaching and facilitation. So, the reason I want to chat to you about this topic around urgency is because it's such a common thing that can show in your coaching practice for yourself as a professional and also maybe yourself personally in your own personal life with your health. And then it can show up in the coaching or facilitation or healing relationship you have with your clients. And it's so important that we understand how to recognize it, that we understand how to work with it and what to do with it, and how to not get caught up in urgency and be part of that dance that can happen. So, yeah, I wanted to chat with you about that today. So, hopefully, you'll leave here today with more understanding about urgency for yourself in your own life and the role it plays or the impact it might have, and how to deepen and strengthen your coaching, therapy, facilitation practice by working consciously with urgency. So, yeah, the reason this topic is so important in more detail is because when we are ourselves in a lot of urgency, or if we're working with a client who brings a lot of urgency to the table, what's happening on a biological level is that their nervous system is in a fight flight response. And there's a lot of that sympathetic energy. They want an answer now, they want an end result now, or they wanted it yesterday, or they want it tomorrow. And there's this kind of like rushing energy, things need to get done quickly. And, that's that's not necessarily always a bad thing, because I do think in life we have to be urgent with things and, hit deadlines and make things happen. So it's not a bad thing. It just becomes a problem when it interferes with our work or it interferes with our own healing journey. And when we are in that nervous system state of the fight flight response, coming from a place of fear, coming from a place of urgency, and that kind of warped relationship with time, what it then does is it sends a lot of stress hormones, so cortisol and adrenaline, into the body through the intersection of the nervous system with the endocrine system. And then when we are flooded with these stress hormones on a regular basis because of our relationship with whatever the thing is, we're not doing ourselves any good in terms of our recovery, because those stress hormones will create an inflammatory environment. And those stress hormones also create an environment where we are more likely to experience pain signals from our brain and suffer with things like the symptoms around endometriosis or PMDD or PMS, etc. So, from that mind body perspective, it's so important to look at, what is my relationship with urgency? Is it there every day? Is it there every week? Where does it come from? Why does it show up? In what context does it show up? Is that healthy? Is that how I want to move forward with it? And as we begin to work with it and be present with it and get curious about it, we can start to unravel it a little bit and not feel so controlled by urgency itself. But it takes a bit of time and it takes a bit of a process. And it's a process that I teach to my students in the Menstrual Coach Academy and train them exactly how to work with this. So if you're interested in really understanding the tools and the skills underneath all of this and how to work with urgency and unravel it, definitely check out the Menstrual Coach Academy. We're starting in September and we've got a new enrollment happening. So do check that out. I'll pop all the links down in the show notes. For my own personal experience, I think it's important for me as an educator and as a coach to share a bit about my own personal experience with urgency. I can definitely relate to this. I'm definitely somebody who, maybe not so much now as I've done a lot of that work, but definitely in the past, even just small things, like I would have been, if I was on my way to the train station, and even though there were regular trains, I would in my head think, oh, I better get there so I don't miss the next train and then be disappointed and have to wait 10 minutes, you know? So there was always this kind of like, don't miss out energy and fear, you know, that kind of thinking of like, if I don't rush, then I might miss something or I might miss an opportunity. So there's that kind of fear. And also, when it comes to my health as well, in the past, obviously, my own experience with endometriosis and pain and struggles I've had with pain, there was also an element of urgency that I had. You know, I'd read all the books, learned all the information, but I was still struggling. And then when I had to dive deeper into the medical system, when I decided to explore that route more for myself, I was definitely in that place of like, this needs to be done now, and you know, a lot of anger and disappointment and waiting lists, etc. And the thing is about urgency as well, it's very often coming from a very valid place. It's not that we're here to give ourselves a hard time or like blame ourselves for being like stressed out because, you know, maybe you're suffering. And in my case, I struggled for a long time with period pain and with chronic pain. And my urgency was valid, you know, it was valid. It just was coming from a kind of a more unconscious place because it was so much the norm for me to be in that like hamster wheel in all areas of my life. So I think it's good for you to reflect on that for yourself. If you're a student of the Menstrual Coach Academy or a graduate or a new student coming in, or maybe you are already coaching and facilitating, or maybe you're just listening to this podcast for yourself personally, all of us, I think it's good for all of us to engage in some reflection on some very non-judgmental, compassionate reflection on the role of urgency in our life and where it comes from. And yeah, I can definitely identify people in my life where it comes from and also contexts, situations I've been in, the education I grew up in as well, for sure. And then I did grow up in kind of a countryside part of Ireland, but I also grew up very near the city. And I think that also plays a role, like where you like your relationship with place and the role of place and culture and geography also can play a role with this, and the nationality's relationship with time as well as another piece too to think about. Then, from my professional experience with urgency, and this is one of the reasons why I keep talking about this to my coachee students, is because when I was starting to work as a menstrual cycle coach, before there really was any kind of like one training that you could do, which is why I've created the Menstrual Coach Academy, I I did have a lot of supervision that helped me build my practice and build my body of work and understand what was going on in the relationship with my client. But what was happening was I'd done all these trainings in different modalities and I knew like the tools and the skills and the information to bring to my clients who were struggling with their cycle. But what was happening was it's very easy to just like know that information, but there's a big difference between knowing the information and then actually building a relationship with a new client who's new to this work and weaving all the things you know into your coaching relationship and using your coaching skills and your coaching tools as the means for transformation in your work. And what was happening for me was that the clients that who were coming to my practice, they were experiencing a huge amount of urgency, and when they were experiencing a huge amount of urgency, when I first encountered that, I absorbed it. So, what that looked like was just from an energetic point of view, and me being a sensitive person, they would just put their kind of like fear on the table and their urgency on the table, and they might want to know every single answer. And there might have been a bit of anger in there as well. And, like, you know, in order to be an effective coach, I have to take my time to get to really know somebody and what they've been through and ask them a lot of questions. But I could feel this like pressure, you know, that they like, for again, very valid reasons, they've been through a huge amount and perhaps have trauma in relation to all of this stuff too. So, of course, they have urgency, but they don't yet have the tools or maybe the awareness. They don't have the awareness yet that they're in all this urgency. They don't have the understanding that the hormones associated with urgency are part of the problem. And then they don't have the tools and the skills to unhook from the urgency, because what the urgency is trying to do, which is what the fight flight response does, it's a protective response. It tries to keep us safe. It's looking for an answer. It's looking for clarity. It's looking for connection. It's looking to reduce the overwhelm. It's looking for certainty. That's a really big one in this work. Looking for certainty, looking for answers. It doesn't want any doubt or confusion or overwhelm, or people ripping them off as well, or like spending money on things that don't work. So the urgency has a very important role, but the problem is, from that coaching dynamic perspective, the urgency, it can really get in the way, especially if you are, as a practitioner, especially if you're a new practitioner, or if you're starting out, or you're kind of new to this working with the menstrual cycle. It can feel like really intense, and then you as a practitioner feel under pressure. You're starting to go into your fight flight response. You're starting to maybe get annoyed with the client, or maybe get irritated, or maybe you start like throwing out answers and giving loads of advice as opposed to being in a process with your client. Or maybe you panic and start to like look up loads of information and want to give them certainty with what's going on for them. So, so that's, even just as I'm talking about it, I can feel that in my body, because I've been there so many times, and I know so many of the students in the Menstrual Coach Academy, have experienced this, and the people my graduates who I now supervise as well, we always work through this piece with them, with all different types of clients, So that's really, really important, that we learn how to stay connected to our own, as professionals, our own ventral vagal. We'll be talking about that in the academy. So the rest and digest, grounded, firm, strong boundaries as practitioners, and be what I like to call a regulating resource for our client, so we can still witness them in their urgency, witness them in their pain and their suffering, offer compassion, offer empathy, give them space to voice what they need to say, because maybe they've never shared this stuff before, for various different reasons, and not to dismiss the urgency, and not to say like, oh, we need to calm down, you're carrying too much urgency, that's not going to work, but rather show up as a really confident practitioner, be able to recognize the urgency, speak to the urgency, put it in its place, and then encourage our clients to, well, give them what they need. So maybe they need to understand the process a bit more, or they need a bit of psychoeducation around what's happening in their body, or some reflective practice, all these different things that we're chatting about in the Menstrual Coach Academy, different coaching tools that you can bring in. But it really is about putting the urgency, finding a way to put the urgency gently in its place, not dismissing it, and then reassuring that client and helping them to get to a place of the ventral vagal, so the rest and digest, within the coaching process, okay? And then outside in their life too. And a lot of reassurance. And then over time, as you build your relationship with your client, then supporting your client to sit with what's underneath the urgency. So often what's underneath the urgency is fear, right? So fear of something bad happening again, or something bad happening in the future, or they might really feel a threat of some sort, which is also very valid. Or it could also be, which is often the case in this work, is fear of the unknown, a lot of uncertainty, not knowing what to do, maybe blaming themselves for doing things wrong as well. So what we're then called to do is to support our clients to work through that fear. So some of it will be valid, some of it won't be, and there will be a piece around supporting our clients to build the ability muscle. It's like a muscle, so the ability to sit with some of the uncomfortable feelings and reassure them that it's okay, that we don't have all the answers yet, and that we're going to figure it out, but let's hang out in the unknown together. That's, as you and your client, or you and your group, that you're there with them, you're naming the unknown, you're naming the uncertainty, you're putting words on it, you're putting a container and a structure around it, and you're saying like, look, it's here, like I get confused too, I don't know, we're on this journey together, we're going to figure it out together, but we need to get okay with being in the unknown and not knowing, and I'm right there in the dark with you. Because like you and I, we all know we can't do that, sitting in the unknown alone. It's very, very hard. It takes a lot it takes a lot to hold yourself in the dark. So one of your roles as a coach, as a facilitator, therapist, is to, have the skills to be able to sit in that unknown with your client. And what happens then is that you become even more of a regulating resource. And when they feel safer in that unknown space, and with the Yeah, with the fear, the urgency can start to come down. And then what happens in the nervous system? Their nervous system starts to regulate a little bit more. They feel a little bit more spaciousness. They're giving themselves permission to be scared, but not from a place of fear, from a place of like conscious awareness and kind of acknowledgement of like, oh, I'm just going to allow myself to have some fear today about this. I'm like going through this endometriosis journey or this PMDD journey or whatever it is, any chronic pain really. And I'm just in it and I don't need to know the answer right now. And I'm going to look after myself. And Lisa or whoever, whatever coach you're working with, whatever coach they're working with, is there with them, supporting them through the process. And what can then happen is their nervous system, like I said, regulates. And then once the nervous system begins to regulate, that urgency can drop. And then that urgency doesn't interfere with your work. You're not getting that urgency into your nervous system as a practitioner. Okay, so that's really what I want to explore today in relation to urgency. It's something that we need to reflect on for ourselves personally. So, thinking about how it shows up for you and what circumstances, how does it feel in your body? Where does it come from? Like, what memories does it bring up for you? And then maybe have a little think about that. And then, if you are a coach or therapist or facilitator, yeah, asking yourself, how would you work with a client through that? And how would you support a client through urgency? How would you recognize urgency in the coaching container? I'll give you like it's always very practical examples. Like for me, it's very often people who they might email me in the middle of the night because they're struggling and they find my website in the middle of the night and then they're like, send me a long email with their story and then they want to work with me the next day. And, you know, while I'm here to help people, if I'm immediately available to everyone's urgency, I will get bulldozed by that energy because it's a lot. And then the urgency is kind of like driving the process. So that's one of the reasons why I encourage my students to, if they have consult calls or start working with clients, to just have a little bit of a buffer of a few days or a week before you begin working with a client so that they have time, the client has time to really make sure that is this right for them, that they're going to with you and they have time to kind of like soothe their own urgency without needing you as well in the meantime and working with some tolerance too and then getting to a place of like readiness to work with you as well. So that's just like one practical example is to like have those boundaries with your calendar, with your emails, not be on available all the time. And that can be hard if you have people pleasing tendencies like a lot of us do if you're in the caring profession. So those are all practical things to think about. And then in the Menstrual Coach Academy, we are starting in September 2025, if you're listening to this in 2025. And enrollment is now opening. The early bird is ending on the 1st of August. So I think that might be next week. And yeah, you can head on over to menstrualcoachacademy.com. I'd love to have you there. If you are a coach, healer, facilitator, therapist, educator, or any professional who is interested in learning the art and the skill set of menstrual cycle coaching and facilitation, you are more than welcome. And you're also more than welcome if you want to engage in this journey personally. There's a lot of people who come through this course and they're there because they want to really embody this work and go deeper with me personally. And it's a beautiful program. I've just finished up the last year's group and I've just been reading assessments and sending them all their certificates. And it's just been so wonderful to see all their amazing takeaways and what they're doing with this work. So next week I'm going to be recording another episode all about the course as well, so you know exactly what it is. And in the meantime, have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your week. Thank you for listening. Send me an email anytime or leave a comment down below if you're on YouTube or on Instagram. And I will talk to you soon. Take good care.